Miyamoto teased several upcoming 64DD titles, including Mario Paint 64. Players imagined the possibilities. An art application on the Nintendo 64 disk drive could compete with personal computers. They could create art and share it online. That was intriguing. But the Nintendo 64 disk drive's release was a mess. It was originally scheduled to come out worldwide in 1997, but delay after delay pushed the system's release to December of 1999, and it was only available in Japan.
I mean, you had to buy the N64DD console itself out of the back of a magazine. You couldn't just go into a store and buy this like any other console. You had to find it in a magazine and then take the initiative to send away for it and pay in installments and have games shipped to you. So the barrier of entry for this thing was just way too high in the first place. There was a lot working against this console having success, let alone any of the games that were on it or were planned for it.
One of the first games available on the 64DD was Mario Artist Paint Studio, previously known as Mario Paint 64. It came bundled with a Nintendo 64 mouse, and was one of several games in the Mario Artist series.
Whereas Mario Paint was a standalone game, Mario Artist was going to be a series of 8 games. They were going to put out 8 Mario Artist games, and they only ever got to release 4 of them. You had the Paint Studio, Polygon Maker, Talent Studio, and the Communications Kit. Now, these 4 were supposed to be used together. They could also be used on their own, but the real exciting part was that you would use them together to create something. You would say, create a polygon in the Polygon Maker. You'd save this to the N64DD, eject your disk, and then you would put in the Talent Studio disk. The Talent Studio, I believe, was intended to animate or do something with these polygons that you've already painted and figure out some way to make some kind of video out. It was a little bit more than just animation at that point. Then, once you've done all this, you could eventually share it. You would then take that and apply that to the communication kit.
In October of 2000, less than a year after the 64DD launched, Nintendo officially discontinued the product. It's estimated that Nintendo only sold around 15,000 units.
It's my theory that Nintendo seemed to be trying to create this Mario Artist series to maybe compete with the Adobe Creative Suite or other things similar. This idea of a home computer that could kind of do whatever you wanted, that was very appealing to people. Clearly, the market was saturated at that point with home computers. There was a lot happening, at least in the United States, regarding that. And so on Nintendo's side, I just think they were trying to compete with something that maybe was doomed to fail from the start. I'm not sure.
Nintendo never made another Mario Paint, but they continued to reference the game in future releases. In 2009, Nintendo released WarioWare DIY for the Nintendo DS. It contained a music and drawing program very similar to Mario Paint. Several of the developers stated Mario Paint was a huge influence on them growing up. Director Taku Sugioka said, "When I asked staff members around me about this, a lot of them said that Mario Paint was the game that taught them the joy of making games." When programmer Takumi Hatakeyama was asked if Mario Paint made him who he was today, he replied, "Without a doubt. I remember that time very clearly." In 2015, Nintendo released Super Mario Maker for the Wii U, where players could make their own Mario levels. According to director Takashi Tezuka, the game originally began as a Mario Paint sequel, but they decided to combine the fun of creation in Mario Paint with a developer tool to make Mario levels. It's no wonder that Mario Maker is filled with Mario Paint references, and even contains the Nat Attack minigame. Even outside of Nintendo, Mario Paint's influence is evident. The first episode of the popular web series Homestar Runner was animated completely in Mario Paint.
I see Mario Paint references just out in the world, outside of Nintendo's brand, and outside of their own games. Toby Fox of Undertale is a big fan of Mario Paint. He has a tremendous love for the game. I think the dog sound from Undertale, most people are now familiar with that from Undertale and don't realize that it's actually from Mario Paint. About a year ago, I watched the Mystery Science Theater 3000 reboot that Netflix put out, and I was laughing to find that there was Mario Paint references even in that for whatever reasons.
Wow, pretty intense game of Mario Paint happening up there.
It's cool to see that people are just using Mario Paint still in innovative ways that incorporate it into other forms of media.
There are artists making paintings using the program. Streamers recreating scenes from their favorite games. There's even a PC program called Mario Paint Composer, which allows users to create Mario Paint style music without the limitations of the Super Nintendo. For some, Mario Paint made a heavy impact on their life and career.
Mario Paint definitely helped me shape my musical sense growing up, because Mario Paint, I think for the first time as a kid, allowed me that freedom to be creative in my own way. I think that freedom allowed me a little bit more expression and not feel like I was making mistakes, or not to feel bad that I might be making a mistake. And I could always change that. I could hear that and say, that's not exactly what I wanted, let's try it this way. So I think that was a good learning experience as a musician. After high school, I went to SUNY Fredonia. It's a New York School of Music in Western New York, and I studied music education and piano. I graduated in 2006, and at the time I was going through a lot of my belongings at home, and I dug out my Super Nintendo, and in the Super Nintendo was Mario Paint. I thought, oh my goodness, I forgot about this game completely. So I went on YouTube, which was still starting out, and I did some searches on Mario Paint, and one of them brought up the music editor right away. This might be something I could get into. So I decided to get out the Mario Paint Player's Guide and recreate some new music from the back and upload it to YouTube. I did that twice, and after a while I got a little bored, because all I was doing was regurgitating other people's work. I wanted to be a little bit more original. So I recreated Tetris, and I uploaded that. Problem was, Mario Paint has a limitation of how long your music can be before you have a loop in. So it looped right in the middle of the song. So I would fire up the music editor, I would put all the notes in. That was a long process alone, because I was creating the music from scratch. And once I was happy with everything, I would record it on the computer through a capture card, and then I would erase it. It felt terrible to erase it all, because that was the only take I had. Then I would create the second set, and then save that, record it over, and then I would just take the two clips, put them together. I had done a project, it was a fan request at the time, from Mega Man 2, Wily's Castle. And it took me about 8 hours. I did it all in one take. And I recorded every second. I put them all together. It was difficult to do because the music itself is very fast. Mario Paint was not able to really keep up. So I had to make a lot of creative decisions on how to mask those issues. I was getting a lot of different responses and comments saying congratulations on Nintendo Power. And then I remember thinking, I don't remember ever seeing my name in Nintendo Power. So I found out that the name appeared in the August issue, 218, page 93, at the back in the community area. It was a great feeling to be in the magazine. Having been an avid reader since I was super young, I was still subscribed to Nintendo Power. I loved being a part of Nintendo officially. Like, this is an official acknowledgement. And I know from then on, I would be known as this Mario Paint person on YouTube. And it holds true today.
So as I get older, I eventually go off and start my career, working in the industry and doing film, storytelling, and so on. And of course, I have stories that I want to be telling, but I also don't have the resources of, say, a big budget or even a large crew, a lot of actors. So I began to consider Mario Paint as a viable option.
Tony, you gotta start living. I live a cautious life.
So with Mario Paint, I can tell stories that have a scope far beyond what I'm able to accomplish normally. For instance, one of the first short films I made in Mario Paint in my adult years was called In for a Treat. It was about Bigfoot being imprisoned in a secret government base in the United States and managing to escape during a bake sale by giving everybody food poisoning. Just trying to imagine what that would be like to do in live action. I started submitting my Mario Paint work to local film competitions and showcases, and I was very excited by the kind of response it was getting. A lot of people who saw these things were unfamiliar with Mario Paint, but they were really into the whole aesthetic of it. There's something about it that seemed to resonate with them. It became clear that there's so much more that can be done with this medium. I'm still exploring what that means. There's such a great synthetic quality to Mario Paint, in that it is digital and that it is pixel. It always invokes the feeling of video games on some level, even if people are unfamiliar with Mario Paint. And so that's something that's really fun to play with in regards to short films.
So I applied to be an animator and then got this extremely vicious rejection letter that told me I was a terrible artist and even probably a worse animator and I shouldn't even try. And despite all my years of Mario Paint, of course, that's very disappointing. So at that point I said, well, I want to do something, and I want to do something now, and it has to be creative. And I ended up looking up courses for design, art, and settled on graphic design. So I worked in design for over a decade, and then what happened was I was working on game jams and stuff here in Toronto in around like the mid-2000s, which is when the indie scene here kind of blew up. Around 2011, I submitted this game concept I had to the IGF called Home. So it's a game where you write the story of your character. So as you explore the world, you're examining things, getting these sort of silent movie-style text boxes. But every now and then you'll examine something, and the game will ask you, well, did I pick that up? Or like, I didn't take that knife, did I? Like, I would never do that. And your only choices are ever yes or no. But as you're making these choices, the game then starts building other aspects of the narrative for you. So it's almost like you're building a bridge as you're walking across. Home used these things I call planning sheets, which isn't my idea. I completely stole them from 80s Nintendo. If you've ever seen those images of how they made original Mario and Zelda games, they had these sort of grid-style planning sheets. So their artists and designers could design models on paper and keep track as people were sort of translating that into their software at the time. I realized that was a great idea because I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I had to plan things out so I could make this game. So I draw things with pencil and lay things out and plan stuff. And that all came from using Mario Paint and doing those storyboards and realizing I had to make some note of something so that I could keep on track. So when the trailer went out, which was like this amazingly rudimentary trailer, it was getting picked up by websites. And I suddenly realized, oh my goodness, people are interested in this. And then we launched Home, and it was a huge hit. And we were totally shocked. After Home succeeded, I thought, well, maybe there's something here. Maybe there's a way for us to turn this into like a real gig. So at the end of that year, I decided to quit doing freelancing and take a stab at making games full time. And thankfully, I've been doing it ever since. So it's really kind of all because of Mario Paint that I suddenly realized that digital art and making stuff on a computer that's creative was, awesome.
Does limitation breed creativity? In In the case of Mario Paint, absolutely.
As far as I know, it's the only game that Nintendo has put out that allows you as the player to tell your stories. And we are the stories that we tell. Perhaps that's why people have such profoundly personal experiences with the game and why they range in such different ways. Everybody has a different experience with Mario Paint because they use it in unique ways, because their use is a reflection of how they are unique. I still play Mario Paint because that feeling is still there. Storytelling is the oldest medium, and I just love that about Mario Paint. I think it's always going to be one of my favorite games for that reason.
Funding for Gaming Historian is provided in part by supporters on Patreon. Thank you.
In 1992, Nintendo released a quirky little racing game for the Super Famicom and Super Nintendo. They called it Super Mario Kart. The game began as a failed experiment, developed as a small side project within Nintendo's Entertainment Analysis and Development Group. But the young group of designers saw potential in the game and persevered. Over time, it evolved into an offbeat kart racer, featuring twisty racetracks, power-ups, and familiar characters from the Super Mario universe. Despite receiving little hype leading up to its release, Super Mario Kart was a surprise success. It became the best-selling Super Famicom game in Japan, and one of the best-selling games for the system worldwide. But more importantly, Super Mario Kart brought people together and set a new standard for multiplayer console games. It launched a franchise that still exists today and continues to be one of Nintendo's best-selling game series. This is the story of Super Mario Kart. In the fall of 1990, Nintendo entered the next generation with their newest console, the Super Famicom. But they were late to the party. NEC's PC Engine had been on the market since 1987. Sega had joined the competition with the Mega Drive in 1988. However, Nintendo was confident their latest console would dominate the market. Hardware-wise, it was much more powerful than its predecessor, the Famicom. But the true strength of the Super Famicom lay in the software. Nintendo knew that all the hardware power in the world meant nothing if the games weren't good. The Super Famicom launched with 2 games, and they struck a balance between showing off new technology and providing exciting gameplay. The first launch title was Super Mario World, a continuation of Nintendo's most popular franchise. Super Mario World was an evolution of the beloved series, with minor technical features to show off the new bells and whistles of the Super Famicom. Things like rotating platforms and transparency effects were cool, but didn't affect the gameplay that much. The second launch title, however, was an impressive technological feat, F-Zero. F-Zero was a fast-paced, futuristic racing game where players zipped through huge, sprawling maps with long, narrow tracks. It was unlike anything ever seen on a console, and it was all thanks to a new graphics technology in the Super Famicom called Mode 7. Mode 7 was able to scale and rotate a background, altering the perspective for a pseudo 3D effect. It was impressive. Critics were blown away by F-Zero. Famitsu magazine gave the game 37 points out of 40, 3 points higher than Super Mario World. One reviewer stated, "The sense of speed found here is unlike any other racing game we've seen so far. It feels like this game clearly shows off the allure of the Super Famicom." But there was one major problem with F-Zero. It was a single-player game. That bothered Nintendo's chief software producer, Shigeru Miyamoto. Miyamoto was the man behind some of Nintendo's most popular game series, including Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda. He was also heavily involved with developing the Super Famicom. He consulted on the system's design, the controllers, and even the packaging. Miyamoto insisted that the Super Famicom come with 2 controllers. He wanted to ensure developers would keep multiplayer in mind when they made games. But ironically, neither launch title utilized both controllers. F-Zero was single-player only, and while Super Mario World was a 2-player game, players couldn't play simultaneously. Miyamoto felt that development teams had only scratched the surface of the potential of the Super Famicom. So he devised a new project. Make a game like F-Zero, but for 2 players. He assigned the task to 2 talented staff members within Nintendo's Entertainment Analysis and Development Group, Tadashi Sugiyama and Hideki Kono. Both men had experience working with Miyamoto. Sugiyama joined Nintendo in 1983 and came up through the creative department with him. Sugiyama initially designed characters such as Popo and Nana from Ice Climber, and eventually became a game director. His first job was the highly anticipated second game in the Zelda series, Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. Sugiyama also had experience with the Mode 7 technology in the Super Famicom, having just wrapped up director duties on Pilot Wings, a flight simulation game. Working alongside Sugiyama was Hideki Kono. Kono joined Nintendo in 1986 and cut his teeth designing Ice Hockey, a fun arcade-like sports game for the Famicom Disk System. But his most significant work was creating the overworld maps and levels for both Super Mario Bros. 3 and Super Mario World. Miyamoto oversaw both projects. Kono recalled he learned a lot about game development and creation by working under Miyamoto. Now, in the fall of 1990, Miyamoto entrusted Sugiyama and Kono to direct a new racing game for 2 players. As for himself, Miyamoto would serve as a producer, a self-proclaimed, pretty relaxed role. He remembered, "I don't know if I can really say I participated in this development. It was more like I observed it." Sugiyama and Kono also recruited additional staff, including programmers, to help with the project. Among them was Masato Kimura. Kimura had helped program F-Zero, so it made sense for him to help with a potential sequel. He was named the director of programming. They also brought in Hajime Yajima. Yajima had previously worked on Pilot Wings, implementing a digital signal processing chip, or DSP chip, on the cartridge. The chip helped the game program run extra calculations behind the scenes. Sugiyama and Kono knew their 2-player racing game would need this chip to work. So Miyamoto walked over to Yajima's desk, tapped him on the shoulder, and said, "Let's work together." With a team in place, Sugiyama, Kono, and the rest of the staff got to work. But by most accounts, the work was somewhat informal. There was no master design document, and Kono recalled not taking any notes during meetings. They were more like chat sessions. Everyone sat near each other in the office, so team members simply went up to each other's desks and talked. Many team members split their time with other, more extensive projects. Despite this, they were a dedicated group. Kono recalled that early development was mostly just sitting at one's own desk, grinding it out. Unfortunately, they quickly learned that making a two-player F-Zero game was next to impossible. F-Zero's racetracks were massive, with long straightaways that gave a sense of speed. The tracks were displayed over an area of 100 screens, but due to hardware limitations, it was way too complex to do this for two players simultaneously, so sacrifices had to be made. With two players, the racetrack would have to be downsized from 100 screens to only 16. With such a small race course, they couldn't add those long straightaways, only twists and turns. Kono finally admitted, with more than one player, it would have been impossible to illustrate the high speeds of F-Zero. F-Zero's fast, futuristic vehicles would not work on such a small map, but maybe another type of vehicle could. So, as a last-ditch effort to save the project, the team changed things up.
That was our first idea, actually. A fun, light-hearted game we use to surround unrealistically in cars. It wouldn't be the life-or-death, dangerous world of F1 racing, but more the atmosphere of screeching wheels as you sit around an amusement park. From those ideas, the concept eventually evolved naturally from cars to karts. Shigeru Miyamoto.
Go-karts were a perfect choice. They didn't go very fast, which suited the smaller, winding courses, and they were becoming more widespread in Japan thanks to the rising popularity of F1 racing. Japanese auto manufacturer Honda was heavily involved in the sport, providing engines for winning racers such as Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost. And many F1 racers started their careers by training in go-karts. There were many F1 racing video games. Nintendo had even made a few themselves. But there were very few kart racing games. The idea had enormous potential. Co-director Hideki Kono recalled it was lucky timing for us. But there was one big problem. No one on the staff had ever ridden a go-kart. Co-director Tadashi Sugiyama purchased a book on go-kart racing and watched videos, hoping to get more acquainted. But a senior illustrator on staff and a veteran of the anime industry, Yuichi Kotabe, shared a piece of wisdom with the team. No amount of research beats the real thing. Kotabe suggested the team go to an amusement park and ride around in real go-karts. Kono took the idea to Miyamoto, who needed to approve the outing. Miyamoto rebuked the suggestion, thinking it was unnecessary. But he eventually relented. The team took a trip to the Nemu no Sato amusement park and drove around on go-karts for a day. Illustrators took sketches of the karts. Programmers got a feel for physics and handling. The development team also got to experience the lower speed and perspective of the vehicle. It was an educational experience, but more importantly, Kono, Sugiyama, and the rest of the staff learned that kart racing was really fun. But that was only the start of their crash course on go-karts. Back at the office, the team built a small remote control kart to learn about its internal construction and to let staff members get more familiar with the vehicle. Unfortunately, a programmer immediately crashed it into the wall, ending their research. Despite a few bumps in the road, a new game took shape from the ashes of the old one. By June of 1991, the development team had a prototype featuring two driving modes. The first mode used a slower F-Zero style hover vehicle. The second mode used karts. At this point, there was no racing at all, just aimless driving around a generic track. But between the two vehicles, the team loved the karts the most, specifically the experience of zooming past other racers. But visually, the game needed some work. The racers were generic people with helmets and coveralls in various colors. Kono noted that with 8 nearly identical guys racing, it'd be boring. So then we began to focus on design. They needed a better way to tell the racers apart. So the development team brainstormed possible characters that were easily recognizable from behind. And one character immediately came to mind: Mario. Adding Mario and Friends to Nintendo's two-player racing game was a good idea for multiple reasons. For one, the Super Mario series was easily Nintendo's most popular franchise. Super Mario World was the best-selling game on the Super Famicom at the time. Including Mario in this new racing game was a guaranteed way to boost sales. It wouldn't be Mario's first racing game either. Nintendo threw the plumber in earlier titles, such as the Famicom Grand Prix series, mostly for marketing purposes. But more importantly, from a design standpoint, adding Mario and his friends to this new two-player racing game provided variety and recognizability. So as an experiment, the team added Mario, Luigi, and Bowser as playable characters. It was a game changer.
You'd be able to tell immediately whether it was Mario or Luigi by the color red and green. They looked good visually, and we were able to clearly differentiate their characteristics, so we thought it was a good choice. Hideki Kono.
Kono made the decision. This was now a Mario game. Super Mario Kart. The two directors split up responsibilities for the project. As a veteran of the Super Mario series, Kono oversaw the game's overall presentation. Tadashi Sugiyama was responsible for course design, backgrounds, and characters. With the Mario theme in place, Shigeru Miyamoto's vision for the game evolved. Super Mario Kart wasn't just a two-player racing game anymore. It was about the thrill of competition, the fun of driving in go-karts, and the joy of playing video games with friends. But before they could figure out the gameplay, the team had to fill out the roster of playable characters. Mario and Luigi were obvious choices. Princess Peach and her loyal servant, Toad, also made the cut. They also added the newest character of the Super Mario series, Yoshi. The cute dinosaur made his debut in Super Mario World, and quickly became one of Nintendo's most likable characters. He particularly appealed to women and children. Rounding out the roster were villains, including the Big Koopa himself, Bowser. It was the first time players could control Bowser in a Mario game. The team also added Donkey Kong Jr., a somewhat surprising addition. According to Miyamoto, it was to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Donkey Kong Jr. arcade game. Sugiyama also noted that Donkey Kong Jr. was more recognizable from behind than his father, Donkey Kong, because he wore a shirt. The development team now had 7 characters, but needed one more to complete the roster. So they threw in the most common enemy of the Super Mario series, the Koopa Troopa. After a few experiments with character design, the roster was complete. But the Super Mario Kart team didn't stop there. To help differentiate the racers further, they applied attributes such as acceleration, top speed, weight, and handling ability. Mario and Luigi were balanced racers, with mostly even stats. Peach and Yoshi had excellent acceleration, but poor handling. Toad and Koopa Troopa could easily turn corners, but weren't very fast, and their lightweight made them easy to knock around. Bowser and Donkey Kong Jr. were the fastest and heaviest characters, but their acceleration was slow. With the racers in place, the Super Mario Kart team had to design racetracks. They got plenty of inspiration from Super Mario World. The team created many courses based on Dinosaur Land. World 2 of Super Mario World, Donut Plains, got a corresponding racetrack. The grassy landscape contained a dirt track and narrow bridges to traverse. The ghost houses scattered throughout Dinosaur Land, known for their hidden exits, became Ghost Valley, a track made of wooden planks and filled with hidden shortcuts. World 6 of Super Mario World, Chocolate Island, also got a racetrack, with plenty of dirt and mud to slow players down. And of course, there was Bowser's Castle, full of lava pits and dangerous jumps. Other tracks weren't necessarily based on Super Mario World levels, but fit perfectly into the Mario universe. For example, Koopa Beach had soft sands and shallow water that carts skimmed across. Vanilla Lake was a track filled with ice, snow, and chilly waters. And finally, there was the ultimate challenge, Rainbow Road, a bright, colorful racetrack with no guardrails to keep racers on the course. At first, these courses were simple raceways with twists and turns, but the designers added enemies, characters, and objects from the Mario universe. Monty Moles popped out of the ground in Donut Plains. Ice blocks on Vanilla Lake made navigating the course even more difficult. Thwomps in Bowser's Castle could block a player's path or smash a cart. The designers also changed how carts drove on different terrain types. An asphalt track was a relatively smooth ride. Ice courses made driving a little more slippery. Stone blocks made the carts bounce up and down slightly. To help streamline the creative process, the Super Mario Kart team created a track editing software suite that allowed them to manipulate the courses directly on the game cartridge. Designers could place objects like speed zippers and jump bars on the racetrack, add walls or obstacles, and even configure the driving path for computer-controlled players. It was a huge time saver. The new obstacles and terrains made the racing even more dynamic, and getting the kart controls right was more important than ever. Head programmer Masato Kimura spent most of his time tinkering with kart physics. He struggled to find a balance. The more realistic the controls got, the less it felt like a video game. Miyamoto got involved too, to the detriment of Kimura. Miyamoto constantly changed his opinion on how he thought the karts should control, which worried and annoyed Kimura. But luckily, Kimura remembered one of the game's core ideas: to capture the fun of driving go-karts. He said, "I had to go back and tinker with the controls over and over, till I approximated something that felt right." The team also added new elements to the driving experience. Racers could jump, something not typically found in a racing game. But Miyamoto insisted on it, claiming it was a feature that couldn't be missing from a Mario game. But one new technique would become a core element in the Mario Kart series: drifting. Drifting was a driving technique made popular in Japan. It was thrilling, but somewhat tricky to perform. Cars drift by countersteering in the opposite direction of the turn. Initially, the Mario Kart team tried this idea, but most playtesters couldn't complete the move. The team wanted to ensure that any player could pull off the maneuver, so they simplified the concept. All players had to do was hold the L or R button and steer in the direction of the turn. Although Hideki Kono knew the compromise wasn't perfect, he thought the technique was really cool and fun to perform. He wanted to reward players who could pull it off, so the team made the karts go faster around turns during a drift. Driving the karts was a blast and easy to learn, but it rewarded players who could perform the more advanced techniques. There was also no speedometer in the game. The development team felt it would clutter the view. The sound of the go-kart's engine would signify how fast a player was going, and naturally, everyone would want to drive a go-kart as fast as possible. Still, at that point, Super Mario Kart was just a racing game set in the Mario universe. That is, until the team added a feature that would define the series: items. Super Mario Kart was not the first racing game to use items. For example, RC Pro-Am on the Nintendo Entertainment System had various weapons and power-ups scattered along the tracks. Missiles could take out other racers. Turbos gave the player a speed boost, and the tire power-up increased the player's turning ability. But Super Mario Kart took items in racing to another level. The idea was there right from the beginning. Before the development team added Mario to the game, co-director Hideki Kono felt the racing was lacking. It wasn't exhilarating just driving around the track at slow speeds. So, as an experiment, the designers added oil cans that players could throw onto the asphalt and create oil spills, which caused the karts to spin out. It added a new thrill to the race. But with the game now set in the Mario universe, potential items were endless. The development team experimented with a few ideas that didn't make the cut, including a placeable piranha plant. In the end, they settled on 8 items that players could use in the Grand Prix races. Green shells, fired straight ahead or could be placed behind the player as an obstacle. Red shells acted like a homing missile, targeting the nearest racer ahead of the player. Banana peels, which replaced the earlier oil cans, spun out racers. Mushrooms gave players a speed boost. A feather, based on the item from Super Mario World, gave racers a super jump, which allowed them to take shortcuts on certain tracks. The star power-up increased the player's speed and made them temporarily invincible, allowing them to spin out other racers and blow through obstacles on the track. There were also coins, an idea from Miyamoto. After all, what was a Mario game without coins? Coins served multiple purposes and added a layer of depth to the race. Collecting coins increased the max speed of the cart, but they also served as a currency. If the player got hit with an item or spun out by another racer, they lost coins. And if a player fell off the track, Lakitu took a few coins away. And finally, there was the lightning bolt, arguably the most powerful item in the game. It shrunk all the other racers on the track, slowing them down and making them vulnerable to being run over. Playtesters loved how the lightning bolt created sudden upsets. The Super Mario Kart team tested items incessantly to refine the balance. And thanks to the track editing software, designers could place item question blocks on courses to quickly test them. However, they ran into a problem. The playtesters found that items sometimes led to chaotic and unfair racing. For example, players in first could get powerful items like lightning bolts or stars, giving them an extraordinary advantage. But co-director Tadashi Sugiyama had a simple solution. The chances of getting certain items depended on the player's position, lap, and race course. If a player was in last, they had a much better chance of getting powerful items. But if they were in first, they would likely get less useful items. It worked perfectly. Thanks to the item balancing, there was no guarantee a skilled player could come out on top. It allowed for even more thrilling upsets and tighter races. DSP chip programmer Hajime Yajima implemented the change, but he couldn't get it working perfectly. The Super Famicom wasn't powerful enough to calculate item odds for both human and computer-controlled players. To compromise, the design team scrapped the idea of computer-controlled players acquiring items. Instead, they got unique weapons based on their personality. Mario and Luigi essentially got a star power-up, making them invincible temporarily and dangerous to racers who got too close. Toad and Princess Peach threw poisonous mushrooms, which shrunk racers. Yoshi, Bowser, Koopa Troopa, and Donkey Kong Jr. launched projectiles that could spin out racers, including an egg, a fireball, a green shell, and a banana. While items added a new dimension to the racing, some development team members worried that hardcore racing fans would scoff at the idea. It introduced too much randomness to the races. So as a compromise, the designers added an option to disable items. But Miyamoto thought the option would remove tension from the experience. He said, "I think that indeterminacy, knowing that something might happen, is the most fun." Co-director Tadashi Sugiyama agreed.
Mario Kart is not Mario Kart without the items. The opportunities that come from using the items means that both skilled and unskilled players can play the game together. A key characteristic of Mario Kart is how it's often the case that you can't win just with your driving skills alone, with the races being very close as everyone does everything they can to get over the finish line first. Tadashi Sugiyama.
In the end, the team removed the no item option from the game. With items in the game, the racing portion of Super Mario Kart was ready to go. The game featured a Grand Prix mode, where players competed against computer-controlled opponents and each other to win a trophy. There was also a match race featuring one-on-one racing. And finally, there was a time trial mode, a must-have feature for a racing game. But, as Miyamoto envisioned, Super Mario Kart really was more than just a racing game, and there was one more gameplay mode that would set the game apart from other racing titles: a battle mode. As development began, the Super Mario Kart team knew they wanted a game mode that had nothing to do with racing, so they tried several experiments. But ultimately, the one that stood out was a game where players hurled a ball at each other. They collected points if they scored a hit, but the game needed some work. There were very few walls or obstacles on the course. This allowed players to drive around freely, and it made the playtesters dizzy. Not only that, but the Super Mario Kart team was running out of memory on the cartridge. As they added more and more features to the racing modes, they had less and less space to work with, so the team shelved the battle mode. But as the racing modes neared completion, the team decided to revisit the idea. To fix the dizziness problem, they added more walls and obstacles to the courses. They also replaced the generic ball attack with items. The designers also added a new item, exclusive to the battle mode in match races: the Ghost power-up, which turned a player invisible and stole the opposing player's item. To keep track of hits, each player had 3 balloons. If they got hit, they lost a balloon. For Miyamoto, the battle mode was another defining feature of the game.
The very fact that battle mode had nothing to do with racing is what made us want to add it and give it special attention. It helped strengthen the image of the game. It is not you becoming world-class racer, but rather you get to race around and play in this go-kart with your friends. Shigeru Miyamoto.
With racing, time trials, and now a battle mode, Super Mario Kart was almost ready for prime time, but it wouldn't be complete without music. For that, co-director Hideki Kono brought on a composer he had worked with in the past, Soyo Oka. Oka seemed destined for the job. She had been at Nintendo since 1987 and had composed music for earlier Famicom racing titles, including Famicom Grand Prix 2, 3D Hot Rally, and Versus Excitebike. She had also previously worked with Hideki Kono on ice hockey. Her music had a distinct sound. Oka's work was known internally at Nintendo as Soyoism. Oka enjoyed the challenge of composing music under the restrictions of the Famicom, where music still had to sound good if a track disappeared due to hardware limitations. She called it a sound puzzle. But with the Super Famicom, those restrictions were gone. It allowed her more freedom in her compositions. She called the new system Beyond Wonderful. Oka's first works on the Super Famicom were Pilot Wings and SimCity. Both game soundtracks had a mellow, relaxed sound. With Super Mario Kart, Oka had to come up with more upbeat music that fit in a racing game, but also had a Mario flavor. Hideki Kono, who was in charge of the game's overall presentation, gave her the freedom to unleash her Soyoism on the soundtrack. While a few music tracks were based on previous Mario compositions, most of Oka's work was brand new, and the new compositions sounded like they had been in the Mario universe the whole time. There was the upbeat, hard-driving theme of the Mario circuit. The relaxing, coastal vibes of Koopa Beach. And Oka's personal favorite, the epic, synth-heavy music of Rainbow Road. What began as a failed experiment to make a 2-player F-Zero game was now a unique, fun, go-karting adventure. Super Mario Kart expanded the idea of what a racing game could be. Power-up items allowed for thrilling, upset victories. Distinct racetracks made navigating the courses an integral part of the gameplay. and the new battle mode made games with friends even more intense. For co-director Hideki Kono, the thrill of competition made Super Mario Kart a memorable game.
I really played the game a lot during the adjustment and debug phases of the development. Because of the strong competitive gameplay, once I started test playing, I would get excited and start shouting out while I played. I just couldn't help it, because of the randomness and potential for making huge comebacks. I may have been a bit distracting for other development teams working on other projects. Hideki Kono.
By the summer of 1992, Nintendo was ready to reveal Super Mario Kart to the world. But surprisingly, despite being a Mario game, Super Mario Kart did not generate much hype leading up to its release. Early previews in video game magazines were short, lost in a sea of other games. Many of the write-ups compared the game heavily to F-Zero. Nintendo tagged Super Mario Kart for an August 27, 1992 release in Japan. Leading up to the launch date, co-director Tadashi Sugiyama remembered feeling unsure about the game's success. He said, "I knew it was fun, but I didn't imagine users would actually like it that much." Sugiyama was in for a huge surprise. Thursday, August 27th, 1992 was a big day for Nintendo. Super Mario Kart was on store shelves, and Nintendo was hosting their annual Famicom Space World exhibit at the 4th Shoshinkai Trade Show in Tokyo. The event allowed Nintendo and third-party developers to show off their latest titles for the Famicom, Super Famicom, and Game Boy systems. Out of the 240 games exhibited, Super Mario Kart was one of the few playable titles at the show. People waited up to 1 hour in line to play the game for only 5 minutes. Word about Nintendo's funky new racing game spread quickly. Children and adults rushed to stores to pick up a copy. Some, including HAL Laboratories' head of software development Satoru Iwata, snuck out of work to buy the game. In just 2 days, Super Mario Kart was sold out across Japan. According to Electronic Gaming Monthly, many stores wouldn't even accept deposits to hold the game, and it only got more popular. Reviews poured in from the Japanese video game press.
Games that simulate reality can never actually be reality, and while catching up to reality is very difficult, fiction can draw near to it, or even surpass it in some ways. While Super Mario Kart is absolutely a work of fiction, it's more faithful to reality than any simulation. It simulates the excitement of race and the joy of driving. Namco Shida, Famitsu.
Famitsu magazine gave Super Mario Kart a 32 out of 40, calling it exhilarating, challenging, and much more polished than F-Zero. Family Computer magazine scored the game 24.5 out of 30, noting that the multiplayer modes were very appealing. However, the game wasn't perfect. One reviewer felt that doing well in the game depended on getting lucky with items. And a 16-year-old from Tokyo wrote to Famitsu claiming people were barfing while playing the battle mode. But that didn't stop Super Mario Kart from flying off store shelves. It entrenched itself in the Famitsu Top 30 list for more than a year. The Yomiuri Shimbun, one of Japan's largest newspapers, nominated Super Mario Kart as one of their top games of 1992. Competitions were held throughout Japan, where people competed for the fastest times around tracks. There were even rumors Nintendo was working on an updated special edition cartridge for a 1993 release. Super Mario Kart made its way into other mediums as well. The Super Mario Club Show, a weekly video game program on Japanese television, regularly featured Super Mario Kart competitions. There was also a rush of merchandise. The combination of Mario and go-karts lent itself well to toys. There were plushies, battery-powered RC cars, small go-kart figures, model kits, children's toys, and more. Super Mario Kart would become the best-selling Super Famicom game of all time, selling 3.82 million units in Japan. But would it be popular elsewhere in the world? 1992 was an important year for Nintendo of America. It was the 16-bit Super Nintendo's first full year in stores, and Nintendo faced stiff competition from Sega and their 16-bit console, the Genesis. The Genesis had been out since 1989 and made quite a dent in Nintendo's market share. The Genesis was also cheaper than the Super Nintendo and had more games. In addition, Sega had recently launched their flagship mascot to compete with Mario, Sonic the Hedgehog. Nintendo had to change things up to stay competitive. They lowered the price of the Super Nintendo from $200 to $150. They also released a standalone console without a bundled game and only one controller for $100. As a response, Sega lowered the price of their Sonic Bundle Genesis to $130, started offering a standalone console for $100. Sega was also showing off their newest hardware creation, the Sega CD, due in the fall of 1992. The peripheral beefed up the hardware power of the Genesis, and the CD medium provided more storage space, better sound, and full motion video games. Nintendo also had plans for a CD-ROM attachment, but it never came to fruition. Nintendo's best hope for success was with its software.
The name of the game in this business is games. When the consumer pulls out his wallet, he wants top value for his entertainment dollar, and that's what we've always delivered. But this new lineup represents the best group of games we've ever introduced. Peter Main, Nintendo of America.
Nintendo showed off their new game lineup at the 1992 Summer Consumer Electronics Show in Chicago. During the show, Nintendo announced more than 175 new games for the second half of 1992. 75 of them were for the Super Nintendo. It was the largest rollout of new software in Nintendo's history. There was Mario Paint, an educational art program that came with a mouse. Street Fighter II, a port of the popular arcade fighting game. And finally, Super Mario Kart. CES attendees got to try all the latest titles. Super Mario Kart was the surprise star of the show. Luckily, gamers wouldn't have to wait very long to own a copy for themselves. With little text in the game, the localization process was relatively quick. However, there were minor changes between the Japanese and international versions of the game. Most notably, the animations during the trophy presentation screens. In Japan, Bowser and Peach drank champagne when they won a Grand Prix race. But for the international releases, they simply celebrate with the bottles. Nintendo of America was adamant about maintaining a squeaky clean image with parents. On September 1st, 1992, just 4 days after its Japanese launch, Nintendo released Super Mario Kart in North America. And just like in Japan, the response was incredible. GamePro magazine gave the game a near-perfect score, praising the multiplayer modes and accessibility for people of all skills. Electronic Gaming Monthly gave the game its Editor's Choice Award, called Super Mario Kart the best driving game to come along for some time. Nintendo backed up Super Mario Kart with a fourth quarter $30 million advertising campaign.
You make a neat task. We're going to battle mode and run his tank with speed. Fast and way too fast. It's two-player fun on the split screen. Only for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Now you're playing with power, super power.
Super Mario Kart graced the cover of the October 1992 issue of Nintendo Power, which contained tips and tricks, maps, and strategies for various courses. Nintendo also teamed up with Domino's Pizza, which had a Super Mario Kart scratch and win game with $25 million in prizes. In December of 1992, Super Mario Kart crossed the Atlantic and hit store shelves in the UK. British video game magazine Control scored the game an 86 out of 100. calling it the best racing game on the Super Nintendo. The following year, Super Mario Kart reached the rest of Europe. German magazine Video Games had high praise, calling Super Mario Kart the best racing game of all time. Not bad for a small side project at Nintendo. Super Mario Kart was a surprise hit. Nintendo sold more than 1 million copies globally in less than a year. It was so popular that Nintendo bundled the game with the Super Nintendo in several regions, further increasing sales. By the end of the console's lifetime, Super Mario Kart had sold more than 8.5 million units worldwide, making it the fourth best-selling Super Nintendo game of all time. But while Super Mario Kart sold incredibly well, it impacted the living room even more. Whether it be the natural competitiveness of racing or the friendly aesthetics of the Mario universe, Super Mario Kart brought people together like no other game before it.
So innocently, Super Mario Kart crept into the house. It looked at first about as interesting as Trike, but I soon discovered that this game crossed barriers, both in gameplay and generations. And what's even sweeter, the kids didn't always win. My teenage years as a hoon on wheels were finally beginning to pay off. I knew how to drive like a fool. They didn't. Mark Cannon, the Sydney Morning Herald.
Friends teamed up to unlock all the races in Grand Prix mode. Siblings duked it out in battle mode or raced each other one-on-one. Parents competed with their kids for the fastest time around the courses. So it was no surprise that Super Mario Kart won a Parents' Choice Award in 1992, given to, quote, entertaining products that introduce skills, reinforce them, and glamorize courage and common sense. Other game developers took notice of the popularity of Super Mario Kart, and soon a flood of clones hit the market on both PC and consoles, hoping to cash in on the kart racing craze. Sega put out Sonic Drift on their handheld Game Gear system. Atari released Atari Karts for the ill-fated Jaguar console. There were also clones on the Super Nintendo, such as Street Racer, a part racing, part fighting game. But nothing came close to the success of Super Mario Kart. The game stayed on the Nintendo Power Charts for an astonishing 68 months, until the magazine stopped tracking Super Nintendo games. It was the beginning of a popular new franchise for Nintendo. Their next console, the Nintendo 64, would feature the first follow-up to the original game, Mario Kart 64. And soon, Mario Kart games would come out for every new Nintendo console and handheld. And today, its popularity is bigger than ever. The best-selling game on the Nintendo Switch is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Many of the staff members who were involved with the original game still work at Nintendo. Shigeru Miyamoto is still Nintendo's chief software producer. He is widely considered the greatest video game designer of all time. Hideki Kono remained involved in every future Mario Kart game. Today, he is in charge of Nintendo's mobile game division. Tadashi Sugiyama would go on to work on several Mario Kart games, including Mario Kart 64 and Mario Kart Double Dash for the GameCube. Sugiyama also directed F-Zero X, released in 1998. And thanks to the power of the Nintendo 64, he was finally able to implement multiplayer in the fast-paced racing game. Today, Sugiyama is still with Nintendo, working as a designer. Programmer Masato Kimura, who worked tirelessly to perfect the kart controls, continued to program various Nintendo games, including The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker and Super Mario Galaxy. Most recently, he worked on the latest Mario Kart game, Mario Kart 8. Hajime Yajima, who implemented the DSP chip into Super Mario Kart, continued to put his technical knowledge to use. He provided assistance with new, graphically intense games, like Star Fox and Super Mario 64. Today, he is still working within the technology department at Nintendo. But not everyone stayed. Composer Soyo Oka left the company in 1995 to become a freelancer, working in radio, television, and video games. But Super Mario Kart stayed with her. Even today, people come up to Oka and talk about the game. She said, "I'm truly moved to think that I have inspired children and young people more than I had ever imagined. At these times, I again come to understand how much of an amazing hit the game was, and how many people played it." In total, the Mario Kart franchise has sold more than 150 million copies worldwide, making it one of Nintendo's best-selling series. And it all started with Super Mario Kart. A game that began as a failed experiment became one of the most influential games of all time. In 2019, the Strong Museum in Rochester, New York, acknowledged the game's impact by inducting it into the World Video Game Hall of Fame.
Super Mario Kart's unique combination of familiar characters and exhilarating social gameplay produced a powerful franchise that invited friends, family, and gaming fans of all ages to the Mushroom Kingdom for an unforgettable ride. The Strong Museum.
Funding for Gaming Historian is provided in part by supporters on Patreon. Thank you.
Today I'll talk about a franchise that deserves a lot more love, and that's the Super Mario Land games. The games were Nintendo's way of bringing Super Mario Bros. Onto the Game Boy. There were only 3 games, and in one of them, you don't even play as Mario. But they were all solid titles, and they introduced a few characters to the Mario universe that have become staples. Between the ages of 6 and 12, the Game Boy was my life, and I had all the Super Mario Land games. They were some of my favorites on the system, and I feel like they're a bit underappreciated today. You don't hear about them that often. I mean, there's a few references to the series in Super Smash Bros., but that's about it. But I have many fond memories of playing these games growing up, and they deserve more love. So today I'll share the history of the Super Mario Land series and what makes these Game Boy games so wonderful. The Super Mario Land series began during the development of the Game Boy. The Game Boy was created by Research and Development 1, Nintendo's oldest internal development team. Their previous inventions included the Game & Watch, the D-Pad, and Rob the Robot. Legendary Nintendo engineer Gunpei Yokoi and his co-worker Satoru Okada came up with the idea for the Game Boy. According to Okada, Yokoi originally envisioned the Game Boy as a successor to the Game & Watch. It was more of a toy than a gaming system and would play simple, quick games. Okada disagreed and thought the Game Boy could be more like the Famicom or the Nintendo Entertainment System, a full-fledged system with third-party developers. Yokoi eventually gave in. The new system needed games to go along with it, and Gunpei Yokoi knew just what to make. We initially thought that a character like Mario was essential for the launch of such a machine. Platform games are accessible to all, and Nintendo's mascot obviously had enough popularity to attract many potential users. However, Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto wouldn't be involved. He was too busy working on his own projects for the Super Nintendo, like Super Mario World and The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. So, development of the new Mario game would fall to R&D 1, the same team developing the Game Boy. It made sense. They knew the system inside and out, as well as its limitations. They also had experience in game development, having made several NES titles, including Kid Icarus and Metroid. Yokoi was pretty familiar with the Mario franchise as well. Miyamoto consulted with Yokoi when he made the original Mario Bros. Arcade game, as well as Super Mario Bros. From a design perspective, Miyamoto said Yokoi was the biggest influence on his career. It was the first time Miyamoto wasn't involved in a Super Mario game. Director duties were given to Satoru Okada. Okada was more of an engineer than a game designer, and that came in handy. They had to shrink the colorful world of Super Mario into a handheld system that could only display 4 colors. Being co-creator of the Game Boy, Okada was more than capable of the job. Because it was a brand new development team, R&D 1 created a whole new land for Mario to explore. Thus the game's title, Super Mario Land. It launched alongside the Game Boy on April 21st, 1989 in Japan, July 31st, 1989 in North America, and September 28th, 1990 in Europe. Super Mario Land was originally planned to be the package title with the Game Boy, but Nintendo famously decided to include Tetris instead, gambling that Tetris would appeal to a bigger market. In Super Mario Land, Mario explores the world of Sarasa Land. Its inhabitants have been hypnotized by an alien named Tatanga. He has also kidnapped Princess Daisy, who makes her debut in this game. Mario must traverse through the 4 kingdoms of Sarasa Land and rescue Daisy. This is the first Super Mario game not to feature Luigi, Toad, or Princess Peach. Now, when you first start playing, the game definitely looks small, but compared to the other launch titles, it's actually pretty impressive. All the Game Boy launch titles had a somewhat similar look. Considering most of them were developed by R&D 1, that makes sense. If you look a little closer, though, R&D 1 came up with a few tricks to get around some of the Game Boy's limitations. For example, there are no 1-up mushrooms. Why? In previous Super Mario games, a red mushroom made Mario bigger, and a green mushroom gave Mario an extra life. With only 4 gray colors on the Game Boy, that's impossible to implement. So in Super Mario Land, mushrooms make Mario bigger, while hearts give Mario extra lives. Each of the 4 kingdoms look more like real-life locations than anything from the Mushroom Kingdom. Urabuto looks like ancient Egypt. It's got hieroglyphics, pyramids, the works. Muda, I'm honestly not sure what this is supposed to look like. It could be either the lost continent of Mu, which is supposedly in the Atlantic Ocean, or maybe the island of Bermuda. Either way, there's a bunch of water in this kingdom. Easton is definitely based on Easter Island, considering the large number of Moai statues situated throughout the level. And finally, there is Chai, which is based on ancient China. The music definitely has a Far East sound, and the level is filled with bamboo and, pardon my Chinese, jiangshi, which are basically hopping vampires. At the end of each level, there are 2 exits. If you can reach the top one, you'll get to play a Chutes and Ladder style bonus game to earn extra lives or a power-up. While exploring Sarasa Land, you'll hear catchy tunes by Hirokazu Tanaka, the game's composer. Tanaka is mostly known for his work on Earthbound and Dr. Mario, but his jingles in Super Mario Land are, as usual, very good. It's amazing how he can make a 30-second tune, and it never gets repetitive. The ending theme is also one of the best compositions on the Game Boy. Now, gameplay-wise, Mario feels off. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely a Mario game. There's stars, mushrooms, jumping, stomping on enemies, everything. But the physics are a little different than the NES games. Mario's movement is much more stiff, almost tank-like. He won't be skidding off the edge of a cliff in this game. Mario stops on a dime. Mario also has a new power-up as well. No, it's not a fire flower, although it definitely looks like one. It's the Super Ball. Firing a Super Ball bounces a projectile all over the screen, destroying enemies in its path. It can also collect coins. While going through Sarasa Land, you'll encounter a whole bunch of new enemies. Fun fact, the Super Mario Land manual kept all the Japanese names for the enemies. No, that's not a Koopa Troopa, it's Nokobone. These are also known as bombshell Koopas, since their shells explode after you jump on them. Oh, you think this is a Goomba? Nope, it's Chibibo. I mean, come on, this is a Goomba. There's Pakun flowers, Sarasa Land's version of the piranha plant. But most of the enemies are new here, including my favorite, Chicken. Besides platforming levels, there are also some shoot-'em-up levels, where Mario is in either a submarine or an airplane. These levels are a nice change of pace. Even the final boss stage where you fight Tatanga is a shoot-'em-up level. Interestingly enough, Miyamoto wanted these kinds of levels in the original Super Mario Bros., where Mario would ride a rocket and fire a beam gun. But when he couldn't make the controls work, he abandoned the idea. At just 12 levels, Super Mario Land is a short game. An average player can beat the game in under an hour. Once you beat it, you can play it through again in expert mode. There's no save system, but I doubt you'll need it. At the time, critics praised Super Mario Land. Computer and Video Games Magazine said, a small yet perfectly formed Mario whizzes past equally impressive sprites and backdrops. Electronic Gaming Monthly said, even though it's black and white and on a 2-inch screen, Super Mario Land is a fantastic game that is, above all, very fun to play. Now, I've got a few gripes with the game. You can't go backwards in a level, and I don't really like how Mario handles. It's also just way too short. It hasn't aged as well as the other games in the series. By the time the sequels came out, Nintendo had a better grasp of the Game Boy and what it could do. Nevertheless, Super Mario Land is still a decent platformer, and it showed the potential of the Game Boy, and that's important for a launch title. You might be shocked to learn that Super Mario Land sold more than 18 million copies worldwide, making it the 7th best-selling Super Mario game of all time, and the 4th best-selling Game Boy game of all time. It sold more units than Super Mario Bros. 3. I'd probably chalk that up to the game being a launch title for the Game Boy. Super Mario Land proved to be very popular, even spawning toys, comics, a board game, and drinking glasses. The ambassadors of Funk even made a song about it. It was enough popularity for Nintendo to begin working on a sequel. In November of 1991, a new group of employees at R&D1 were assigned a project, Super Mario Land 2. Hiroji Kiyotake was given director duties. He had previously worked on Dr. Mario, but he was more well known for being the original character designer of Samus in Metroid. At first, Kiyotake and his team wanted to follow in the footsteps of the previous game, make a whole new world for Mario to explore. But they made it a little too new, and the feedback wasn't great. Kiyotake said, when we showed our first draft to everyone, they were like, I don't know, is this Mario? We realized we were on the wrong path, so we toned down that idea and made something a little closer to the existing Mario world. And when you play Super Mario Land 2, it definitely feels more like a Mario game. I'd say it's pretty close to Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo. There's battery saves, an overworld map, secret levels, bonus games, 6 unique worlds, and graphically, it just looks more like Mario. One interesting change to the Mario formula is the storyline. For once, Mario isn't rescuing a princess. Kiyotake stated, Mario has always fought for someone else's benefit, but we thought it would be a nice change of pace to make a game where he's fighting to win back something of his own. In this instance, Mario tries to take back his castle from a new villain named Wario. Wario made his debut in Super Mario Land 2 and has become a mainstay in the Mario universe. He began simply as a name. R&D1 wanted to create a new villain for Mario. Well, Mario's a good guy, so what's the opposite of good? Bad. The word for bad in Japanese is warui. Flip the M upside down in Mario and you get Wario. R&D1 imagined Wario as a Bluto-type enemy, if Mario was Popeye. This time you'll explore a world called Mario Land. I don't know where this is in relation to the Mushroom Kingdom, but it's apparently where Mario lives. He's done pretty well for himself to afford this massive castle. While Mario was in Sarasa Land saving Daisy, Wario, who has always been jealous of Mario, took over his land. So technically, this is a direct sequel. Within Mario Land are 6 unique worlds to explore. Conquering each world gets you a coin, and you need 6 of them to unlock the door to the castle, setting up your final battle with Wario. Takehiko Hosokawa, a relative newcomer to Nintendo, designed the whole look of the game. He'd only been with the company for a year and a half before starting work on Super Mario Land 2. But this was the first game he got to work on that really showed off his designs, and it's really superb work. Super Mario Land 2 feels and looks more like a Mario game. Each world feels pretty unique. They can be accessed at any time, so there's no certain order you need to beat them, meaning their difficulty is about the same. Kiyotake and his team claim getting the difficulty level just right was the hardest part in making the game. You've got Pumpkin Zone, which has some spooky enemies. My favorite being the walking Jason mask, literally named Jason in Japan. Mario Zone has you explore a giant mechanical Mario statue. I guess Mario built this to worship himself. One cool Easter egg are the N and B blocks in one level. Back in the 60s, Nintendo made these to compete against Legos. One level is built completely out of these blocks. Gunpei Yokoi worked on the N and B toys and was a producer on Super Mario Land 2. Turtle Zone is the required by gaming law underwater world. As a kid, I always thought being inside the whale was kind of creepy. Look at those teeth. Oh, and the sharks are wearing boxing gloves. Macro Zone has Mario shrunk down to a microscopic size, exploring a house and fighting off ants and mice. Whose house is this? We don't know. We'll probably never know. Space Zone was a unique area that you can't just go to it on the map. You actually have to beat a level to get there. Gravity is gone and Mario can float around in space. It makes for some cool level design. Also, the world boss is Tatanga from the first Super Mario Land. And finally, there is Tree Zone, where you battle flies and bugs and eventually defeat a massive angry bird. Seriously, his name is just Bird. It's almost as good as Chicken from the first game. After you collect all 6 coins, you've got to take back your castle. This level is pretty challenging as it's full of traps. Wario and his crazed look awaits you at the end of your journey. One interesting change to gameplay is coins. Instead of getting 100 and resetting to 0, you can collect up to 999 coins. You can spend these coins on bonus games to win extra lives, power-ups, and more coins. Killing 100 enemies earns you a star power-up. Speaking of power-ups, there are plenty to find in Super Mario Land 2. The bunny ears are very cool, but it can also make levels very easy. You can literally flap your ears across areas and barely fall. The Fire Flower power-up is finally back. To get around the lack of colors, Mario grows a feather out of his hat to signify he can shoot fireballs. He also has this new spin move, which is handy for breaking blocks below you. R&D1 did bring back a few things from the first game. If you reach the top area of the exit, you get to play a bonus game, and 1-ups are still hearts. Kazumi Totaka, another newcomer, composed the music in the game. And if that name sounds familiar, it should. Totaka is famous for Totaka's Song, a simple little jingle he likes to hide in the games he works on. He's still at Nintendo today, so he's hidden his song in a ton of games. For Super Mario Land 2, just wait on the Game Over screen for 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Totaka's work here is incredible. Catchy tunes and classic sound effects. Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins, was released on October 21st, 1992 in Japan, November 2nd, 1992 in North America, and January 28th, 1993 in Europe. It was the largest Game Boy game up to that point, a whopping 4 megabits. Like its predecessor, Super Mario Land 2 was a hit with critics. Electronic Gaming Monthly summed it up pretty well by stating, "Absolutely the best Game Boy action I've ever played." The game would go on to sell more than 11 million units, making it the 6th best-selling Game Boy game of all time. This is my personal favorite of the Super Mario Land games. They fixed all of my complaints from the first game. You can go back in a level now. There's way more stages. Mario feels like Mario again. My only real complaint is in some areas there's some slowdown. It's also a fairly easy game. Now, when I first beat Super Mario Land 2 as a kid, I thought for sure Mario had peaked. It can't get any better than this on the Game Boy, right? Well, in a way, Mario did peak with Super Mario Land 2, because the next game in the series stars not Mario, but Wario.
You are me, Wario. Wario Land, Super Mario Land 3, where being bad is good and greed is good.
Yes, Wario Land, Super Mario Land 3, was the 3rd installment in the series. There is no doubt in my mind that Super Mario Land was added to the title for brand recognition. When the first 2 games sell more than 29 million units combined, it's a smart move. This was Wario's first game all to himself. Many of the same people who worked on Super Mario Land 2 returned, including director Hiroji Kiyotake and designer Takehiko Hosokawa. After getting kicked out of Mario's castle, Wario hears a rumor that the brown sugar pirates of Kitchen Island, yeah, there's a food theme in this game, stole a statue of Princess Peach. Wario's goal is to find the statue and sell it for a hefty price tag to buy his very own castle. It seems the developers kept with the theme of opposite of Mario. While Mario games are generally fast-paced with lots of platforming, Wario Land is a little slower paced with more exploration. And instead of mushrooms making you grow, it's garlic. The name of the game in Wario Land is Collecting Treasure. Wario collects coins, which are tallied up at the end of each level. You'll also have to spend money. You can't use checkpoints or even leave a level without ponying up some dough. You can even attack enemies with coins. Hidden throughout stages are treasures, which Wario admires after beating a level. He's just like a retro game collector. This aspect of the game really drew me in as a kid. It might have been the beginning of my love for collectibles in games. Wario can jump on enemies, but he has special hats that give him powers. The Bull Hat allows him to ram through blocks easily and ground pound, which stuns nearby enemies. The Dragon Hat lets Wario shoot out flames for a short period of time. And the Jet Hat lets you jump higher, run faster, and fly through the air. With 40 levels, it's a much bigger game than Super Mario Land 2. There's plenty of secrets in here as well. One cool feature is how the levels interact with the map. For example, in Rice Beach, one level will alternate between water and no water depending on the tide. Wario Land is also a fairly decent challenge. I can breeze through the first 2 Mario Land games, but Wario Land always gave me a good fight. The final boss is against this absolute unit of a genie, and once you defeat him, the map reveals the missing statue of Princess Peach. But here comes Mario, who did nothing flying in to steal your prize. I actually feel bad for Wario. However, the genie decides to grant Wario one wish, and of course, he wants a castle. The size of the castle you get depends on how much treasure and coins you collected during your journey. My first playthrough, I got a tree stump. Wario Land Super Mario Land 3 was released on January 21st, 1994 in Japan, March 13th, 1994 in North America, and May 13th, 1994 in Europe. Critics once again loved the game. Wario even got his own cover of Nintendo Power on issue 58. The game sold more than 5 million copies. This game marked the beginning of the Wario Land series, and sadly, the end of the Super Mario Land series. In 1995, Nintendo hyped up their newest console, the Virtual Boy. It was basically a headset that played games. Everything was rendered in red and black, but it did have some cool 3D effects. Nintendo treated it as a successor to the Game Boy, but it was ultimately a disaster. During the Winter CES show of 1995, Nintendo teased a few titles, including a new Mario game. It went by several different names. Some called it Mario Adventure, others called it Mario Brothers Virtual Boy, but it's most commonly referred to online as Virtual Boy Mario Land. This game never came out, so we don't really know too much about it, but it looked like a standard Mario game that utilized some 3D effects. The Virtual Boy did get a Wario Land game, though, and it's quite good. In fact, Nintendo kept making Wario Land games, the last one being Wario Land Shake It on the Nintendo Wii. In 2011, Nintendo released Super Mario 3D Land on the Nintendo 3DS. Was this a return to the Mario Land series? No. It has a similar name, but as far as I can tell, it has nothing to do with the Super Mario Land series. Nintendo took a gamble handing off the reins of Mario to a team that did not include Shigeru Miyamoto, but it ultimately paid off. Are these games revolutionary? Not really, but they were important. They clearly helped make the Game Boy a success by selling more than 34 million units combined. I have wonderful memories playing these games growing up, and I'm sure anyone else who played them feels the same way. In fact, one fan by the name of Toruz released a ROM hack that turned Super Mario Land 2 into a Game Boy Color game. It even added Luigi as a playable character. Very cool. But let's not forget that these games established new characters into the Mario universe. I mean, think about it. Without Super Mario Land, we might not have Daisy or Wario. And without Wario, we would have never gotten everyone's favorite character, Waluigi. That's all for this episode of The Gaming Historian. Thanks for watching.
Funding for Gaming Historian is provided in part by supporters on Patreon. Thank you.
In 1996, North America was introduced to a new Mario game on the Super Nintendo. But it wasn't just any Mario game. It was a role-playing game. Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. It seemed like an odd idea. Mario in an RPG setting? Mario had been in a lot of different genres. Puzzle games, sports, kart racers, edutainment. But an RPG might have been the last genre on people's minds when it came to the Italian plumber. But Super Mario RPG was a hit, and it's considered not only one of the best Super Nintendo games, but also one of the best RPGs ever made. In Business Insider's list of the top 10 Super Mario games, Super Mario RPG is ranked number 9. IGN placed it at number 10 on its top 100 Super Nintendo games list. Notable JRPG fan and Kotaku writer Jason Schreier lists the game as one of his JRPGs you must play. Super Mario RPG was the result of Square and Nintendo collaborating during their prime. Together, they created something very special. Super Mario RPG is filled with memorable characters, a unique battle system, hilarious dialogue, fun side quests, pleasant visuals, and unforgettable moments. Let's take a look at this classic title and the impact it left on gamers and the industry. Video game developer Square was known for making high-quality role-playing games, most notably their Final Fantasy series. Electronic Gaming Monthly called them the master of RPGs. Square's games sold well in Japan and were a hit with critics. However, sales in the Western market didn't meet expectations. In late 1992, following disappointing sales of Final Fantasy II in North America, Square created a simplified RPG for Western audiences with Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. But people didn't bite. The game only sold about 400,000 copies. 2 years later, Final Fantasy VI, or Final Fantasy III in North America, sold more than 2.5 million units in Japan within a few months, making it their best-selling game of all time up to that point. Critics heaped praise on the game, calling it the greatest RPG of all time and a must-own for Super Nintendo fans. But once again, sales in the Western market did not meet expectations. Square needed to break through in the West. It was a challenge they couldn't conquer on their own, so they sought the help of the most popular video game character of all time. While Square struggled in the Western market, Nintendo was riding high. Their Super Nintendo console was beginning to outsell the rival Sega Genesis. Children recognized their flagship mascot, Mario, more often than Mickey Mouse. Super Mario World sold more than 20 million units. Even spin-off games like Super Mario Kart were a huge success, selling over 8 million copies. Mario seemed invincible. Shigeru Miyamoto, Nintendo's most well-known game designer and Mario's creator, was eager to try the Italian plumber in other genres, including RPGs. So in 1994, when Square approached Nintendo about collaborating on a new game, Miyamoto was interested. He was a fan of the company and their work. During the pitch meeting at Square headquarters, Square presented Miyamoto and his staff with a picture of a caped Mario holding a sword atop a horse. It made sense considering the source. Most of Square's role-playing games had a medieval fantasy setting. But Miyamoto gave them a puzzled look and said, "That's not right. You mentioned Mario might have a hammer, but not a sword." The two companies had intense discussions about the use of characters, story, and setting. Eventually, they agreed to make the game, their first collaborative project with each other. Square began development in the summer of 1994. Nintendo pitched in with creative consulting to ensure the game had the Nintendo and Mario flair. Director duties were given to Square employees Yoshihiko Maekawa and Chihiro Fujioka. Fujioka previously worked on Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, Square's first attempt to appeal to Western audiences. He recalled the relationship with Nintendo as being, quote, very close and favorable. Shigeru Miyamoto would come in often to meet and talk, as well as provide suggestions on gameplay. Fujioka said that Miyamoto had two main points of advice in his consulting. One was to, quote, keep an eye on handling Mario's entry into the RPG world without destroying the Mario universe. The other was to make the game fun. At first, Super Mario RPG looked like a traditional Square RPG, a top-down view with 2D sprites. Square perfected this look, pushing the limitations of what the Super Nintendo could do with the perspective. But after seeing Rare and Nintendo's Donkey Kong Country, Square was eager to try something new: pre-rendered graphics. They shifted from the 2D perspective to an isometric perspective. This required some extra hardware power to work, so Nintendo suggested they integrate the SA-1 chip into the game. The SA-1 chip had 4 times the processing power of the Super Nintendo CPU, and faster RAM. This allowed quicker calculations to render the graphics and show more characters on screen. Square developed the look using the same Silicon Graphics workstations that Rare used to make Donkey Kong Country. By the summer of 1995, Square had a working prototype, but they couldn't decide whether to give Mario weapons and magic attacks or his signature hammer and jump moves. According to director Chihiro Fujioka, he and Miyamoto confirmed their decision at the 1995 V-Jump Festival, where they unveiled the game to the public for the first time. Fujioka asked the audience to apply for the option they liked best, Mario fighting with swords and magic, or hammers and jumps. The audience overwhelmingly chose the latter. With the game nearing completion, a beta build arrived at the Nintendo of America offices in late 1995. It took the staff by surprise. A few thought it was a silly idea, and were surprised by the RPG battle system menus. In the November 1995 issue of Nintendo Power, one writer commented, "It's fun and a little weird, but it's definitely Mario and an RPG." When it came time to translate the game for the West, notable Square localizer Ted Woolsey, known for his translations of Final Fantasy VI and Secret of Mana, got the job. Since their offices were down the street from each other, Nintendo's product analysis team periodically met with Woolsey to make corrections and ensure the game had that signature Nintendo personality. In 1996, the world finally got to play what would become a classic game for the Super Nintendo, Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars. It was released on March 9th, 1996 in Japan and May 13th, 1996 in North America. In Japan, the game came with a coupon to get 4,000 yen off, or about $37 off, the purchase of a Super Famicom system. This was perhaps an effort by Nintendo to sell through backstock of consoles before the release of the Nintendo 64. Unfortunately, Europe would not see the game until years later. Nintendo software analyst Jim Warnell said that the European release was nixed for several reasons. The time it would take to do another translation, the added cost of the SA-1 chip, and low projected sales all factored into the decision. Super Mario RPG was released just 4 months before the Nintendo 64, at the height of the Super Nintendo's popularity. For many gamers, including myself, it was a great holdover until the Nintendo 64. Plus, it was a new Mario game. We had to get our hands on it. However, I don't think anyone anticipated just how popular and impactful it would become. Super Mario RPG begins just like every other Mario game. Princess Toadstool has been kidnapped by Bowser, and you have to rescue her. But during the fight between Mario and Bowser, a giant sword falls out of the sky and crashes into Bowser's castle, scattering everyone into different directions. Mario soon learns that this is the work of the Smithy Gang, who have not only taken over the world, but destroyed Star Road, which helps grant people's wishes. Mario and the gang must recover 7 star pieces to rebuild Star Road and defeat Smithy. Along the way, Mario meets new characters who join his party. There's Mallow, a cloud who seems to think he is a tadpole, a star spirit who takes the form of a doll, known as Geno. Even Princess Toadstool and Bowser join your party. There's also a ton of memorable non-playable characters that you will meet along the way. One of my favorite parts of Super Mario RPG has always been the characters and their interactions. Some of the lines are great, and the character expressions are very impressive for a 16-bit title. It's a very funny game. According to director Chihiro Fujioka, many of the staff members who worked on the game were fans of stand-up comedy. It's also a gorgeous game. There is no doubt that Super Mario RPG is one of the best-looking games on the Super Nintendo. Square was definitely stepping out of their comfort zone, but it paid off. Everything is bright and colorful, and the isometric view works well without any slowdown. Gameplay is a mix of traditional RPG and action RPG. There's menus, items, equipment, hit points, experience, battle commands, etc., all staples of a traditional Japanese role-playing game. But the battle system incorporates a timing mechanic when attacking and defending. If you time it right, you can hit the A button while attacking to deal extra damage, or hit the B button while defending to reduce damage. According to director Yoshihiko Maekawa, this unique battle system was inspired by a Japanese children's toy. He said it was like a large laptop with these buttons that would play music. You had to press the buttons with good timing to the music. It was that idea, having gameplay built around timing button presses, that inspired me to hybridize these two genres of game, to get a little bit of action and RPG into the same game. Square also incorporated platforming into the game because what's a Mario game without some platforming? There are hidden treasure chests, coins to collect, and obstacles that Mario must traverse by running and jumping. Instead of random battles, enemies appear on screen. There are also mini-games scattered throughout the world. Yoshi races, a minecart maze, running on barrels down a river, collecting coins in a waterfall, and many more. The soundtrack, a combination of remixed Mario tunes and original compositions, was composed by Yoko Shimomura. She had previously worked for Capcom, where she composed the soundtrack to the popular Street Fighter II arcade game. When she wanted to pursue more classical-style music, she left Capcom for Square. Shimomura considers Super Mario RPG a turning point in her career. Nintendo and Square did a great job ensuring the player felt like they were in the Mario universe. Everything you would expect is here. Goombas, Toad, flowers, mushrooms, warp pipes, and Hammer Brothers. Nintendo even threw in a few Easter eggs throughout the game. Square threw in a few as well, most notably Culex, an optional boss that wouldn't be out of place in a Final Fantasy game. It's amazing what Square and Nintendo were able to fit in this whopping 32 megabit cartridge. Upon its release, Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars received rave reviews. GamePro magazine gave it a perfect score, commenting, "Once you pick this one up, you're hooked." Electronic Gaming Monthly was similarly impressed, calling it a masterpiece. Super Mario RPG combines the role-playing elements of Final Fantasy with the world of Mario flawlessly. The game was a commercial success as well. More than 2 million units were sold at a retail price of $75. Square was ecstatic about the numbers. Yusuke Hirata, one of the producers, said that the series would likely continue on Nintendo's upcoming console, the Nintendo 64. However, those hopes were dashed when Nintendo and Square had a falling out. Due to Nintendo's insistence on sticking with cartridge-based media, Square shifted its focus to the CD-based Sony PlayStation for more artistic freedom. This essentially eliminated any hope for a true sequel. Although Square was out of the picture, Nintendo still went forward with the idea. They teamed up with Intelligent Systems and worked on a sequel, Super Mario RPG 2. Possibly due to legal issues with Square, they renamed the game Paper Mario. Released on the Nintendo 64, the game borrowed several elements from Super Mario RPG, mainly the action timing-based battle system and the humorous dialogue and plot. But Nintendo was able to make the game stand out on its own with its unique paper book visual style. It became its own popular franchise and is still around today. But believe it or not, there is another Mario RPG-inspired game in the form of the Mario and Luigi series. Once again, the game series borrows the action timing-based battle system, as well as the humor. The handheld series of games was developed by Alpha Dream, a company with many former Square employees. One of them is Chihiro Fujioka, the director of Super Mario RPG. Music for the series is composed by Super Mario RPG composer Yoko Shimomura. Even with two spiritual successors, fans still clamor for a true sequel to Super Mario RPG. However, Square Enix holds a lot of the rights to the game, so it would take some licensing and legal hurdles to make something happen.
Yo, what up?
A few references to the game.
I'm here, big dog.
Gino makes an appearance.
Yo. How are you? I'm listening. Go ahead.
I'm good. I just wake up and I'm good.
For how long did you sleep?
I know. That's a good question. I don't know. 3 hours?
Okay. Are we going to do a podcast?
Give me. I need recovery because I don't know. My brain is not braining. My brain is not like quickly when I wake up. So give me few moments.
Take your time. I understand. Did you have a good sleep?
What?
Take your time. I understand. Did you have a good sleep?
You can say that.
Do you feel like it was one of the greatest sleeps in the history of the world?
What?
Do you feel like it was one of the greatest sleeps in the history of the world?
No. No.
Okay, I appreciate the honesty.
Fuck no.
All right. And are we really going to do a podcast 2031?
Yes, we are gonna do. But like, let me say something to you.
Say whatever you want to me,
Okay?
big dog. Go ahead, big man.
Okay, so when is somebody is like your sister, but it's not your sister, like is you have friendship like is your sister. You know, like you know what I mean.
Yeah, a good close friend, a good close girlfriend.
Yeah, very, very, very good friend. Like she's like my sister.
Yes, go ahead.
So I make a joke with her in the phone.
Okay, what did you say?
I don't know why I say this. I said to her, I am sitting here with my socks, with my underwear, and with my towel. I don't know why I said this. I don't know. Like I was thinking, I was too comfortable because I was thinking, yeah, I can say anything with her. Anything. You know that feeling?
Yeah, okay.
She's mad.
Yeah, because you disrespected her.
But
So you can tell her after thinking about the situation and wanted to let you know that I regret my actions. Apologies. I will do my best to never let it happen again. I appreciate your friendship and I would like to move on from the situation.
so I wake up 4 days ago. So I cannot have any good day without anything is fucking up.
You were horny. What do you want me to do?
No. You don't have to do anything.
No, I'm not gonna do anything, but it's just like it's part of life. You can't control it. You made a mistake. You should know a very important quote I want you to hear. 4 words. If you don't remember anything from me, I want you to remember this. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Time. Say it with me. Time. Heals. No, say it. Time. You're not saying it. Say time.
Time.
Heals.
Heal.
All. Wounds. I didn't hear you say it.
Time heal all.
No, time heals all wounds.
All wounds.
Yeah. Given enough time, your wounds will heal. And so will hers.
You know, but like I don't mean that. I was not mean that in this disrespectful way, but like I was feeling like I can say anything with her.
Well, you can't.
I know.
So send her your apologies and move on.
know now. Oh my god. But right now I'm not good with women, bro.
Yeah, you're dog shit, dog. You have no experience. You have no game. You lack confidence. You're undesirable. But we could change that. It's not the end of the world. We need to break you down and build you up from the ground. You need to learn how to speak with women. You need to learn how to have confidence in yourself. And that's the thing you have to have first. If you don't have confidence in yourself, no woman's going to give you that confidence. Now, why did you send this thing about you being in your socks and a towel to this girl?
Because I was feeling I can say anything. I was like a really free moment. I'm not like because I was feeling in my heart I can say anything with him. Because like it was good. We was like we've been with each other for 2 years. She knows me, and like yeah, I was feeling like I can say anything.
All right, well, obviously you can't. And 2 years is not that long to know a person.
Yeah, I fucked up.
So tell her how you feel, that you wish you could that you know apologies for disrespecting you. I am going to do my best to learn from this. I want you to know I value your friendship greatly, and I'd like to move on.
You know, I'm a good person.
Okay, good is
I'm not bad.
Good is relative. I think you're good-hearted. I think you were horny and you wanted to communicate.
No.
Yeah.
No,
That's the reason
no.
why a guy communicates to a girl. I'm in my socks. I'm in a towel. That's why. Even if you don't recognize it, you have to understand that there's a sexual connotation to it.
I was not mean.
I'm not saying you were mean, and I'm not saying that was
I
necessary.
was not mean that like that.
Okay, but that's how it comes across.
Oh my god.
It's not that big of a deal, but communicate to her that you recognize that what you said might be interpreted as being disrespectful. You didn't mean it that way, that you love her friendship and you want to move on, and she can take as much time as she needs, but you value her friendship and you'd love to have her back in your life.
Yeah. Okay, I will be back, okay? I will be back.
Are we going to record 2031?
I don't know. Like, I have no idea.
Okay, well.
Because, like, I'm doing I need, like, episode today with someone from the Arabia. So, I don't know, like, in, like, at 3 p.m. today.
I mean, what time? 3 p.m. my time?
Yes.
You're not going to be up at 3 p.m. my time.
I'm in episode with him, so I need to.
Oh, your episode with him is at 3 p.m. Okay, so why don't you go?
Yes.
Why don't you go do what you need to do for an hour, and come back and we'll record.
Okay. 1 hour. Okay.
Okay, so whatever. So I'll see you 1 hour from now at the top of the hour. So you have 1 minute, 1 hour, 7 minutes. Okay.
Okay.
And I want you to be accountable. So in 1 hour, 7 minutes, you better be back